Simon Sinek told us to start with why, and science backs him up. Purpose fuels our greatest impact, but for many high performing women, that purpose still feels like a treadmill. The moment you reach one goal, you need another. I want to talk to you about the ultimate game changer, the Islamic understanding of purpose. It doesn't devalue your success in this world, it gives it infinite value. Because the currency of our actions isn't just a title or a payout, it's a deposit towards the ultimate goal, paradise. Welcome to the Thriving Woman podcast, the show where we stop chasing impossible standards and start reclaiming the peace and power already written into our divine design. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So maybe you're tired, and maybe it's not because you didn't do enough. Maybe you spent the entire week chasing a finish line that seems to move every time you get close to it, right? Like maybe you completed every item on your to-do list, you answered the emails, you posted a perfect photo or posts online, but when the beginning of the next week hits, you still feel stressed and scattered. So one of the reasons for this is because we're trapped in a distraction economy. We're trapped in a system that's kind of designed to keep us scrolling, comparing, and earning our worth. But this focus is costing us our peace. So this week we're going to break up with that hustle mindset and redefine success in a really powerful way. So we're going to use the spiritual power that we've been given in Islam of intention to make every single action, whether it's work-related, home-related, an act of worship. So when you anchor your success to the hereafter and to the infinite, you become completely resilient and you finally find the eternal focus that you've been craving. So, as Muslims, we know this. We understand that there's a bigger picture here, right? But what is really, really fascinating to me is that even though we know this, we still get sucked up into the system, right? We look around and we see everyone else kind of, trying to figure out what their purpose in life is. And they're often anchoring that down to their career, to their family, to leaving some sort of legacy on the planet. And we can get really wrapped up and caught up in all of this distraction, right? And sometimes we even feel like the fact that we have faith, the fact that we, believe in the afterlife, that we believe in the unseen, that we believe in a creator, that this almost like diminishes us somehow in the world. The thing is that, hold on. Sorry about that. Speaking of getting distracted, distractions happen all the time. So what helps us get back on track, right? There are so many things in our environments, in our societies that are distracting us. If we live in a society that's predominantly non-Muslim, I feel like that takes it to a whole nother level. And because we're often surrounded by people who are different than us, who are seeking purpose in things that are more worldly, it can feel like a lot of tension, right? It can create a lot of tension in our lives and a lot of confusion in our minds. So how do we fix this, right? First of all, we need to define what the problem is, okay? So acknowledge, right, where you're feeling overwhelmed. And maybe you guys can share with me as well. Like, I'd love to hear from you. Do you feel overwhelmed in life? Are you experiencing that right now? What area in your life do you feel like there's a bit of tension? There's some, struggle, challenge, overwhelm. Maybe you feel like it's a lack of focus. Maybe you feel literally distracted. Maybe the phone is getting in the way. It's taking up your time. And maybe it's causing you to compare yourself to others. You're not alone if that's the case. I work with really high level individuals, high performing women, and they confide in me that, scrolling through Instagram can be debilitating because they start comparing their life to the lives of the people that they see or they think they see, as they're scrolling through their feed, right? And this can become so consuming. You can start doubting yourself. You can start questioning yourself. You can start feeling like you're not enough, right? So just acknowledging where you're at right now and being able to kind of own the feelings that you're having, the experiences that you are going through, right, is the place to start. Just acknowledge it and also understand you are not alone. So that's part of the isolating ness of this issue, right? When you feel like you're the only one, like there's something wrong with you and no one else understands, that is not the case. And I really hope that by you tuning into this show, inshallah, on a regular basis, that you'll start to realize how many other women are actually facing similar challenges to what you're going through, and they're experiencing similar issues with their mindset, with their emotions, and with getting back on track as you. And that can help us feel a lot better. That can take so much pressure off when we know that we're not alone. So I want to reassure you right now, you are not alone. I've worked with hundreds of women, and we all have our sticking points. We all have areas where we feel like we're not enough or where we feel like we're overwhelmed, right? The problem is that we're told in our society that we need some sort of external validation. And, social media, consumerism, they condition us to believe that our worth is like a fluctuating metric. So like if we have enough likes or enough attention on something that we've put out into social media, we feel up when the likes are up and we feel down when they're down, right? Or it could be anchored to income, right? Are we feeling like we're less worthy, or we're not good enough, or we don't belong in certain rooms because our income is below a certain level? If our income is very high, does that give us a sense of confidence? Does that give us a sense of identity that makes us feel really strong and powerful? And when other people are praising us or giving us positive feedback, how much do these things cause you to actually fluctuate in your mood and how you show up to tasks and productivity? So the external validation is actually a source of anxiety, and it can be a source of chronic emotional depletion as well, right? So if you're feeling really, really drained on a regular basis, just check in with yourself right now. Like, what is draining your energy? Sometimes it's this trap of looking and seeking external validation. So just being aware is always the starting place. So constant distraction, whether it's scrolling, shopping, socializing, they can often be a mild form of self-soothing. So, you're experiencing some sort of stress, you're experiencing overwhelm, and you need to self-soothe, right? You're looking for some sort of comfort, or you're looking for something that can help you emotionally regulate. It's a way to avoid deep focus work or facing underlying emotional needs, right? So this distraction economy, it is capitalizing on our need to feel connected and busy. So because when we feel busy, we're not thinking about, the issues we're facing. We're not acknowledging the fact that maybe we're in a struggle, we're in a challenge, or maybe we need to do better. And so just the acknowledgement, just the understanding, paying attention to when you may be choosing something to self-soothe, to provide that comfort or to provide that emotional regulation. And then understanding if it's a distraction, it's taking you away from what you actually want to be doing, the goal that you want to be focused on, then it's not a beneficial tool, right? Sometimes self-soothing and things that help us emotionally regulate can be very beneficial as long as they help us towards our ultimate goal and they keep us on track in the direction that we really want to be going. So we know that in Islam, we are warned about pursuing the world and allowing things of this earth and this life to kind of take over our hearts and our minds. So the problem isn't really the work, the problem isn't really the wealth, but it's related to our attachment to it, right? And often when we're looking for help, like we want to, experience personal growth and we're looking for education, courses, books on the topic, they often stop at a certain level, right? We're told that it is about, loving ourselves, for example. If we love ourselves and we feel that we're worthy, then that will kind of give us the energy to move forward, right? Or we're told to look for purpose in our careers or in our families. But it stops there, right? But in Islam, we're told that these are more of a means towards a much larger goal. And where attachment needs to really be is actually in the unseen, in the afterlife, with our Lord who created us, right? And when we have that attachment to these much larger concepts, these much more important concepts, then our attachment to the things of the world can become lighter, and we can start to release them and see them from a new perspective, more objective perspective. So distraction is really a symptom. It's not actually a moral failure. So if you've been distracted, if you've been, getting caught up in social media, in, the pursuit of your career, in your family, it's not a moral failure on your part. This is just a symptom of something deeper that's going on. And this comparison culture that we live in is directly related to the exhaustion and lack of focus that we often have. So in Islam, we're told that we can anchor not only our self-worth, like we talked about in the last episode, but our purpose in what is much larger than ourselves, the afterlife, and our Creator, returning back to Him. That brings our focus into line, right? Everything that we do then becomes like a stepping stone in that direction. And we can use that as a tool to evaluate every single one of our actions, every single one of our responses to anything that happens to us in our lives. So this is the eternal focus. And I love the idea of framing it as being hyper-focused on forever, right? So we understand, we're told to remember death often, right? Death is the destroyer of pleasures, and it is the end of this finite life that we've been given. So when we're looking beyond this life, not just to leaving a legacy behind for our kids or something that other people can benefit from in the world after we die, but placing importance on what will continue after our death for ourselves, right? Our own lives that will continue in the afterlife, then that becomes a really powerful way of focusing and really hunkering down and aligning with what matters most. So the power of intention. We know that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, actions are by intentions. And this is the ultimate mindset tool. And I just want to emphasize how powerful this is, because in the world, people are working so hard. I mean, there are studies done on how important it is to understand your why, right? To understand the purpose and how much that changes the outcome, right? So if you know what your purpose is in any goal that you're working towards, it will influence how effectively you can actually achieve that goal. So now, when our intention lies in something so much larger than ourselves and so permanent, right? It's not something that can go away. It's really something that if you stay focused on it, you can't fail, right? If your intention is that you are going to meet your Lord and that you want to face Him in a way that is most pleasing to Him, and that penetrates every action that you take in this life, that is literally the most powerful thing that you can have. So what I really hope to kind of drive in today, and I hope you will take this and consider it and think about it maybe in a new way today, is that what we have as Muslims is so incredibly powerful that it goes beyond all of the tools, the tips, the tricks, the science that is being worked out in the world by neuroscientists and psychologists and on every level. It aligns with all of that. So when people study mindset and how important it is in science, and goal setting and how important it is, and the effects on the body and the effects on productivity, they all align and they all confirm what has always existed in the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He's given us, that focusing on the true reality, the ultimate goal, it is the most powerful tool for success in this life. So we want to embrace it and we want to use it, and you will see it impacting your life in a positive way, right? Because it is so much bigger and so much deeper than, traditional or typical personal development tools go. So whenever you have an intention, let's say, you have a meeting at work, you're budgeting for your household, you want to do a workout, any of these things, they can all become acts of worship when your intention shifts from making money or serving my family to fulfilling the trust, right? And deliberately making decisions and choices that you believe are pleasing to your creator versus doing them for yourself or, to be seen by others, or it takes your intention to a deeper level that's more powerful and driving for you, because you know that even if you don't succeed, for example, let's say you are, working really hard to make money, and or let's say you're working hard to serve your family, right? And let's say you're not recognized. Let's say the kids, they don't appreciate you. Maybe they don't see what you do, and they don't understand how much love and effort and energy you're putting into it. And maybe their words are sometimes hurtful. That will not diminish the reward that you'll get for the effort that you're putting into that family, right? And if you're working at a job, or you're entrepreneur, and you want to make money so that you can give for the sake of God, maybe you want to build a well that will give water to people who really need it. Maybe you want to give food to people who are suffering and struggling. Maybe you want to build something that will benefit people for generations in the world, right? And all of these things align with your goal to please God. Then even if the money evaporates, right? Even if you never reach the goal of building the well, you're still rewarded and appreciated for that intention and the effort that you put in. So you can't lose. That's one of the things that is so powerful and gives us incredible resilience. So worship, we know in Islam, it's not just prayer, it's not just, making wudu, it's not just fasting. It's literally everything that is pleasing to God. So we get to elevate the mundane, things that for the average non-Muslim person are just mundane acts, like eating, like getting dressed, and like taking a shower. All of these things can be elevated, right? Smiling at somebody, hugging your child, removing something from the road that could be harmful, helping someone across the road, opening a door for somebody. All of these seemingly mundane actions can become elevated when we make our intention for the most merciful, for the all-seeing and the most appreciative God. So you can cook a healthy meal, and that can be worship, because you're preserving the trust of the health that was given to you by God. Or you're feeding the people, the kids that Allah has entrusted you with, right? So imagine something like that, like cooking a meal, right? Sometimes it could be frustrating. I hear women complaining like, oh, it's so hard to think about what to cook every day. I feel that way all the time. Like, coming up with a menu is more than half the battle, right? And it can be exhausting, and it can also be monotonous, right? I'm somebody, I like a lot of diversity. I like variety. Doing the same thing day in, day out can be very boring. But when we elevate these kinds of actions and we remember that God may accept this as an action of worship from me, right? If I do it for his sake, how does that feel different, right? Instead of like, oh, I have to make dinner, I have to cook for my family, I have to clean up, I have to do the laundry, I have to go to work. If we are doing these things for the sake of God, now it's like, how much more energy can you put into that act? How exciting can that act be? Now, even if I have to cook dinner every single day, I have to think of what to make. It becomes an exciting endeavor where I'm thinking like, this is going to be so appreciated, right? I'm going to be able to see the results of this action, inshallah, on the day of judgment in my book, in my right hand, right? Like if I could be building and building up, wealth in the afterlife by taking these seemingly mundane actions and elevating them through my intention, I feel energized by that. I don't know about you. So let me know if that feels more energizing when you think of transforming these actions into acts of worship. And maybe you can mention in the chat or in the comments some of the actions that you kind of struggle with on a regular basis. Like maybe it is just making dinner. Maybe it's taking the kids to school. Maybe it's going to work, right? And which of those actions that you have to do on a regular basis that you feel a bit of friction with could you transform by really intentionally focusing on that much larger intention of making that an act of worship, doing that purely for God? The other benefit of this is that you're kind of running your actions and your words and your decisions through a filter. Is this something that would be able to be translated into an act of worship, right? It's a way to also find out where you're doing things that are not contributing to your overall success in this world. So like what kind of actions might you say like, oops, I can't really make that one for God's sake because I don't think he might not be pleased with that one, right? Maybe I'm disobeying him in some way. Maybe it's a sinful action. Or maybe it's something that's really just frivolous and pointless and doesn't really have value. So this is a really important filter to use on a regular basis, really with everything that we do. And not only can it energize us and transform mundane actions into, really powerful acts of worship, but it can help us eliminate the frivolous things, and it can help us eliminate the acts and decisions and endeavors that are not going to be pleasing to us or God on the day of judgment. In neuroscience, this is something that is proven now. So setting a powerful intention creates a new internal state of being. So inside your body actually changes when you have a powerful intention. And having intention for God is the highest form of this. And so it doesn't just only change your internal state, but it now is connecting you with the eternal, with God, and with your afterlife. So intention is the spiritual mechanism for hyperfocus. That's what we want to get from this piece, is that remembering how important intention is. So when you feel like you're scattered, you feel like you're not focused, you feel like you don't know what you're doing, where you're going, what to do, what not to do, take that concept of niyyah or intention to help you narrow down that focus and really lock in and choose what is actually going to be important for you in this life and the next. So professional success, personal health, these aren't like our personal achievements. We're not even attributing them to ourselves anymore either. We're realizing that all of these things are only through the permission of God as well. And we're taking care of something that has been given to us, right? So if you achieve success professionally, if you have excellent health, that's you taking care of what God has given you. And that's also a different perspective, right, than we often live with. We're trying to always figure out, am I good enough? Do I have enough skills? Is this really for me? Am I capable of doing this? But what if you were just looking at it as, I'm just taking care of what God has given me. I feel like a responsibility to be an excellent custodian of the trust that I've been given. That's a really different attitude to approach work with. That's a really different attitude to approach your family with, right? And then the beautiful thing, again, is that when you have that intention, even if you quote unquote mess up, there's still value in what you've done. And it really makes it so much clearer how you can still pivot and you can still change and you can still grow, even if you've made mistakes in the past, even if you've fallen off track, even if you've said or done things that you regret. As long as you're alive, you can recover from that. So that's really powerful resilience. That's purpose-driven resilience. So success is in the effort, not the result. And this is another thing that science nowadays is proving. And it has to do with that dopamine pathway that we mentioned in the last episode, where you're rewarded for your effort. And when we focus, it's so interesting because in the world of personal development, there's a question around, focusing on goals. Like if you focus on the goal, like let's say you're an Olympic athlete and you want to get a gold medal. And so all your training is focused on first getting to the Olympics, and you get to the Olympics. Okay, now I want to get the gold medal. So all of your efforts, your training, your performance there is focused on getting that gold medal. It's really interesting because even if people get the gold medal, they actually end up feeling depressed afterwards. And that's because of our biology. And what to me that points to is exactly what we've been discussing, that when you put your focus on something that is not in this world, so you don't actually know if you're really going to succeed or not, but you have to continue putting in effort day in and day out, right? You have to stay focused on that goal and you have to keep trying. And every day that you may fall off track, you work to get yourself back on track. When you make a mistake, you seek forgiveness. You try again, right? If you hurt someone in the world, let's say, through your words or your actions, you seek their forgiveness, you repair with them, you correct course, you try again, you keep working. So by focusing on the effort, that's what actually can sustain us, right? So we don't have that crash after achieving a goal, because the goal is after our death. So every single day we can keep showing up for that goal. As long as you have another breath, as long as you have another minute in this life, you can keep working for success. You can keep course correcting, and you can keep putting in that effort. And then that effort is going to continue to reward you, because the way that the brain works, whenever you're putting in the effort, and especially that you have it for this really intentional and larger purpose, it's going to help you keep going. It's going to continue to energize you. So when your knee is correct, your intention is correct, failure or external criticism loses its power, right? So when I'm working hard for God's pleasure, if you're going to criticize me, I'm going to take that in a different way than if I was working to please you, right? Because now I'm putting it through a different filter. Everything's through a different filter. And this is so empowering. I just really want you to understand as a woman, as a Muslim woman, how powerful you are in the world as a person who is resilient, who is impervious to external criticism, because the only one you are working to please is your creator. That makes you so strong, because the external criticism doesn't have power, and failing at things doesn't have power, because you're not working just to succeed in this life. The only thing that really matters is your effort and your good intention. And these are recorded regardless of the actual outcome. So the amazing thing, because as women, we often hear things like, oh, I'm just a stay-at-home mom. I'm just a this. I'm just a that. We diminish ourselves, and we often try to align our self-worth with, our roles, and we value certain roles over others. But the amazing thing is that when we're working to serve and please God, when that's our purpose, that applies equally to everyone. So if you're a mother caring for your children, or if you're just a woman if you are a woman caring for your home, or you're a CEO making strategic decisions, on a high level. The scope of your purpose is no longer limited by your social role, by your income, by your career. So the CEO and the housewife can be equally successful, because every act of excellence, every moment of navigating challenging emotions, and every effort to communicate can be a fulfillment of that ultimate purpose. So I'm going through something right now. I'm having a health crisis, you could say. I was diagnosed with cancer about a year ago, and I have a large family. I had a business, and it forced me to really look at my life, to look at my thinking, to look at my intentions, and really shed the things where I was focusing too much on results that are limited to this world. All of us can fall prey to this. All of us can get distracted. That's literally what this world is in a way. It's about, distracting us. There are so many things to get caught up in. Family, love life, money, just trying to survive sometimes. And then looking for recognition, acknowledgement, fame, especially in the world we live in today. It's easy. All of us can fall prey to becoming distracted. But things like a health crisis, right? They can really force you to focus and pare down and look at things in a different light. And I had to go through that process. And I was really surprised at actually what I found. And so I want to use this, what I'm going through now, as a way to help you. Because even if you're not going through something incredibly challenging right now, being faced with a health crisis or a loss of some sort, we can take the opportunity at any time. So my suggestion is, don't wait for something big to happen, something that seems negative or bad to happen to you, to assess your focus in life and really analyze, what am I actually doing these things for? Is it for something that is limited to this world, or is it for something that transcends this world? And there are things that you'll be able to flip. So maybe you find, well, you know what? I am doing this job because I just wanted to make a really good income, and I wanted to get that car, or I wanted to, be able to do whatever it is with your money, right? Maybe you were focused on that, or maybe you wanted that status that you would get from being a doctor or being an engineer or whatever it was. If you find that's the case, don't despair. It's okay. But the fact that you can notice it means that you can change it, right? So imagine if you were in my shoes, right? Or, maybe you are in a situation that's really dire. How does that reframe everything that you're doing in your life? How does that change things? What would you do differently moving forward? And sometimes when you're in the midst of everything, it can be really difficult to kind of tease things out or to kind of reset, because you're in the flow of things. You have a regular routine, you have a way of showing up, habits. So you may need to actually take some time away from things, maybe a little vacation, or maybe a weekend day where you don't do your normal routines and you really take time to sit with yourself and to take a really deep look at your life, at your actions, and really question, honestly, what is it that you're doing these things for? And if you want to shift them to something much better, much bigger, and much more eternal, then it's possible, right? But you're going to have to change your attitude, and you're going to have to stay on top of yourself as well, because it's very easy to slip in to distraction. So shifting the focus from managing, for me, for example, right, in my cancer treatment, I need to shift my focus away from managing the results of the treatment, right? Am I going to be cured or not? Instead, I have to think about, like, what is my intention every day? What is my intention every day? When I go for treatments, when I meet with doctors, what am I intending behind that, right? And then I have to put my trust in Allah for the final outcome. So this hyper focus, this focusing on the afterlife, focusing on God, focusing on whether or not your actions and your choices are pleasing to Him, it works even in the hardest moments of life. And sometimes it's hard to stay focused on this in the good times, right? And so that's why my invitation to you is, if you're cruising right now and life is pretty good, you're not really faced with a dire challenge in the moment, don't wait. Start right now. Shift your focus to what is really the truth, because none of us are going to stay on this earth forever. All of our lives are finite. So every action should align with the truth. And then relying on God for the outcome, that's tawakkul, having trust. So choosing the best action with the best intention, and then completely detaching from the result. So in other words, even if it doesn't turn out the way that you had hoped, it can still be a success. And what happens there is that it helps to release the crippling fear, right? What if it doesn't work out? What if I don't make it? What if I don't get the gold medal? Either way, you had put in the effort all along, and you remain focused on what mattered most, and that in itself is a success, right? So the effort itself and that focus is success. So we have beautiful verse in the Quran: whoever relies on Allah, He is sufficient for him. This is the ultimate antidote to anxiety over results. So if you're someone who really worries about the outcome of things, what's going to happen, what if it doesn't work out, and you're ruminating on those kinds of thoughts, just remember that if you rely on God alone, that He will be enough for you. You actually don't need anything else. And you don't even really need to get that thing that you want so bad right now. Because even if you don't get it, you still have God. You still have Allah. Right? And you still have a chance to be successful with Him. And this is also aligned with having good thoughts about God. And that's something that we should all strive for. And that we don't realize how it shows up in our regular day-to-day lives, that we sometimes don't have good expectations or good thoughts about God. Because who ultimately provides whatever it is that we face, or whatever we're going through, or whatever successes that we are able to achieve? It's God, right? Everything in this world is coming from Him, by His permission. And so He is so generous with us in so many levels, so many ways. But when we, get upset about outcomes, and when we are filled with fear, it's removing us from having those good thoughts and good expectations of God. So shifting our awareness and remembering to step back into having good thoughts, that whatever God does is good. Whatever outcome, as long as you put in the good effort, you have the correct intention, right? Whatever the outcome is, there will be good in it, inshallah. So we want to have something tangible to kind of apply this with. So we're going to do a purpose test. and I'm going to take you through it now, inshallah. So we're going to call this the hyper-focused purpose test. So your task is going to be to anchor an action to eternal value. So for step 1, you're going to identify a priority. So what's a task that you have, or something maybe you have to accomplish that you're most prone to procrastinating on, or it's something that causes you the most anxiety, or you experience the most comparison with? Like what's a challenge that you face in your life? So it could be like, finishing a certain type of report for your job. I mean, could be anything. So share in the comments. What's a challenge or a task that you find causes the most anxiety? Once you decide what that is, then we're going to look at what is the actual limiting thought or the distracting thought. So is there a fear around it that's causing you to procrastinate? Is there a distraction? Are you being driven by external pressure? So for example, a thought might be like, okay, or you find like, I have this report to do for my job and I am procrastinating on it. Every time I have a project like this, I procrastinate. When you look at uncovering the limiting thought, you find you actually are thinking that if this report isn't perfect, I'm going to be criticized, or I'm going to lose my status. People are going to see me in a different light, or maybe I'm going to lose my actual role in my job, right? So there's a fear behind it, fear of criticism, fear of loss. In some cases, and this is something I see often with women, is that they feel like they should be spending their time on something more spiritual or something more important. So for example, the example of, just cooking dinner, or other things that maybe we leave off or we kind of demote in importance in our lives because we feel like we should be doing something more important. And we have guilt around it. Step 3, once you acknowledge what the thought is that's limiting you, you can start to anchor it to your ultimate purpose. So you can ask, how does this task get me closer to my return to Allah? In a good way, right? You always want to return to Allah in a good way, in a way that's pleasing to Him and where you'll be pleased as well. So how can you reframe that task as an act of worship or fulfilling a trust that's been given to you by Allah? So this is the anchor to the akhirah, to the afterlife, to eternity. Reframe it. And if you find like, I can't reframe this one, then you might be wanting to really look at what that action is. And if you want to continue doing it or not, maybe you need to shift something in your life. Maybe you're not in the right arena. So you can ask yourself, like, or say to yourself, I'm fulfilling the trust of my contract to earn a halal provision for my family. So if you're earning money for your family in a halal way, then you're fulfilling that trust. So that's an act of worship, right? Are you cultivating the quality of excellence in your work? And this is what we've been taught in Islam. So like, are you dealing with your family in the best way? Are you dealing with whatever it is that you're doing? If you're at work, are you doing it in the best way, to the best of your ability? That by itself, cultivating that quality of excellence, is also can also be an act of worship. And then 4, you want to formalize your intention. And you can write this down. And it's amazing because some studies show that if you write down your goals, if you write down your intentions, you're, I think it was like 20% more likely to accomplish the goal. And that's just by writing it down. That doesn't mean you even took any action or made any plans. You just wrote it down on paper. So if you can write down what your intention is, it's going to make it more likely that you'll actually achieve your goal. Okay, and it helps you also, again, with that filtering and putting and clarifying and making it really clear to yourself what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it. So you can say something like, my intention for this task is, right? And my suggestion is that you intend it to be purely for the sake of Allah and to be performed with excellence. And also you can, seek to fulfill the trust that he's given to you. So if you're struggling with your kids, this is a really good one. The kids have been entrusted to us. And however we deal with them should be according to that, right? That they're a trust entrusted to us. So sometimes, we can get frustrated. We can get exhausted. And sometimes we can feel like that action, is not as valuable as it really is. So remembering that it's a trust, how would God want you to deal with that trust that he's given you? How would he want you to treat it? Think of something that you really love and value in your life. And if you were to lend that to someone else and they were to return it to you tattered, or if you sent your kid to somebody and they were yelling at them, or they were, if you ever seen like kids playing and another kid steals a toy from your child, how upsetting that can be, right? Brings out the mama bear effect. So imagine when you've been entrusted with so many things, your home, your body, your health, your wealth, your loved ones, your next breath. What kind of care are you handling that trust with? And then knowing that your reward is in the effort that you make. So if you do your best, even if the outcome isn't the one that you particularly desire, know that your reward, that's purely for Allah's sake, will be rewarded with better. And then step 5, after you've done the task, you want to consciously practice relying on Allah by remembering that you've done your best, and then you replacing the results entirely in the hands of the one who is sufficient for you, the only thing you need. Like we say, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. Allah is sufficient for us, and he is the best disposer of affairs. So let me know in the comments your feedback. And, if you've tried to do this in the past, like where did you get stuck? And I just want to remind you that this is something that it can wax and wane. So it's something that we may be really aware of at certain times. And then we can it can fade away. That awareness can fade away. Like last year, right after I was diagnosed with cancer, I was blessed to be able to make Umrah. And making Umrah was just amazing. It was the first time, I think almost ever, that I left my kids, that I was away from my kids for such a long period of time. I mean, really at all. I've maybe only left them for a night or two max. And so, being in a situation where I could purely focus on God, on my real purpose in life, why I was created, and on appreciating him, on reflecting on his names, on his qualities, on his perfection, on his mercy, on his power, and being able to actually really devote myself and really like shed what we talked about in the beginning, the distractions, all of that. I feel like they kind of layer and layer and layer up on us and cover up reality. And so something like Umrah, where you're able to travel and live for days purely focused on worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is really purifying and can help us really get back to that focus. And I felt so good by the end of those, almost 2 weeks. So good by the end. I mean, it felt like I will live like this forever. I will never forget about my purpose. I will, it's so powerful. But then as soon as I get on the plane, get halfway over the ocean, start to feel the distractions in my mind coming back. So that's the nature of this life, where we're going to have moments of clarity, where being hyper-focused on forever is easy. And then there are going to be times where we really do get sucked into the distraction. And we could get to the point where we almost completely forget why we're here. So remembering that we have really important tools given to us in the guidance from God in Islam that help us to revive that focus. And these should be our priority in life. So if you've fallen off track in any of these, this is your invitation to get back to it, to start re-implementing and reigniting the fervor of practice in things, for example, like your salah, your daily prayer, praying 5 times a day, right? So we're talking about distraction and how easy it is to get distracted, but we're actually called to remember our purpose and to refocus 5 times every day at least. But what happens in that prayer? Even in the prayer, sometimes we can get distracted, right? So check in with yourself, okay? And then start to notice, what are those things that are distracting you? What are you thinking about when you're praying? Right? And it's all a matter of having that awareness and then pulling your mind back to what really matters. Pulling your mind back to what really matters again and again and again. And then doing your best to act from that place of that pure intention moving forward. So the more you allow yourself to get distracted and you let this go on unchecked, the harder it will be to pull yourself back, right? Then you might need something like an umrah to bring you back. But we have that opportunity every single day. Fasting is another one. You know, when you're fasting, that feeling of hunger is going to remind you throughout the day of why you're doing this. Like, why can't I eat that food that's right in front of me? You know, why can't I take a sip of water when I'm thirsty? Oh, because I'm doing this for God's sake, right? And that is purifying our intention. It's helping us remember the ultimate goal of this life, what the goal is in the first place, you know? And so if we can just remember this, can you imagine a community of people whose goal is in something larger than themselves, something that transcends time, something that transcends the existence of this world, and that we feel satisfied in putting good, excellent effort into things, and that we do things for God's sake and His pleasure, not the pleasure of the people. I mean, that is so powerful. So if each of us as an individual can kind of refine ourselves and start to focus in this way, even better, on day after day. Can we get better every day? Imagine how that will transform our own lives. Imagine how that will transform our families. And then imagine how those strong families would transform the community. And how those communities then of strong, hyper-focused Muslims could transform the world in a positive way. Right? So the power, the strength, we've already been given so much. Science is just constantly finding out how powerful the tools we have in Islam, the guidance that we have in Islam truly is. But we've had it all along. It's just a matter of understanding its value and then having that awareness of when we are falling off track and then pulling ourselves back on track again and again and again. And thankfully we have the most forgiving Lord who we can return to again and again and again, and whose help we can seek, right? Even in Surah Fatiha that we say so many times a day, it focuses us back to the reality. You alone we worship. You alone we ask for help. Guide us along the straight path. That is basically, in a nutshell, the hyper-focus on forever that we're talking about here. So I pray that Allah makes this a beneficial video for you if you've listened to it. And I pray that Allah blesses you with goodness in this life and the next, and saves you from sadness and illness and any punishment. And may Allah make us a strong community of strong women and strong families that can really take the guidance and act upon it in a way that benefits our own souls and benefits beyond to, the people that we are surrounded by and the world that we live in. Ameen. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to check out the FCAT Institute YouTube channel, subscribe, check out our other videos, and I'll see you here next week, inshallah, for another episode of the Thriving Muslim Woman podcast. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.